If you've ever asked the universe for some kind of sign and got it clear as day, what was it and how did it go? I asked if I should bother sending a text to my abusive ex. My phone responded by discharging all of its electricity through the charger port and refusing to turn back on. Edit. I feel as though I should clarify this, since there's been a bit of confusion. I'm a dude. The abuser was my ex-girlfriend. So, yeah. Sadly that shit happens to guys too. But I was lucky to have supportive friends and family that helped me to get the heck away from her. And now I know what signs to look for and what lines don't get crossed. Actually just got out of the healthiest relationship of my life. And though I'm quite sad about it ending, at least I know now how to find a good person to be vulnerable with. Good phone. I was walking what would have been a 4-hour drive, and I was walking. I straight up begged for a car to stop and pick me up, and literally seconds later a woman stopped who was traveling all the way to where I was heading. Same town. 4 hours away. What are those odds? Similar thing happened to me. A guy picked me up when I was hitchhiking and was going to drop me off at the train station so I could catch a coach to my hometown 4 hours away. As we were chatting we realized we were heading to the same town. He was a delivery driver doing drop-offs along the way. He offered for me to stay with him in the car. I helped him map out his deliveries, and he bought me a pub feed and dropped me off outside my parents' place and came in for a cuppa and met them. Nice. That's a good hitchhiking story. It can be dangerous too though. I don't recommend for just anybody. I gave a guy a ride in the city once. It was after midnight. He had me drop him off in a rural area I didn't know. So he ends up directing me to a closed down grocery store in the middle of nowhere. No houses anywhere within sight this place. I pulled into a gas station directly in front of the grocery store. The gas station was closed, but I knew they had cameras rolling all the time. And it was lit like daytime. He was insisting that I drop him off behind it. Even tried to bribe me with some CDs and crap he had. Said we could hang out for a bit. Now look, maybe this guy just lonely and wanted company. Maybe he didn't want to walk from the gas station. Maybe he wanted to do something crazy. I don't know, but the environment had me very uneasy, and I followed my gut on that one. The more insistent he got about me driving around the back of the grocery store, the more insistent I became that I wasn't going to, and the ride was over right here. And nothing really came of it. He hopped out and thanked me for the ride. Scared the heck out of me. I'm not superstitious at all, but my uncle is. When my nan passed he went to see a fortune teller who told him that anytime our family sees white feathers around, that's nan's way of showing us that she's there. I thought it was a load of bullshit and forgot about it. A few years later I was at a music festival. Everything was coated in dirt and dust being churned up by thousands of people's feet. Even the air was so thick with dust it was making it hard to see and breathe. I was on the edges of the mosh pit when I started to have my first panic attack. I'd never had one before. Didn't know what was happening to me, and I was terrified. I felt like I was being crushed, and like I was the only person in the world at the same time. I remember desperately thinking I don't want to be alone. I don't want to be here alone. I crouched down in the middle of the dirty dusty crown, and when I opened my eyes there was a single white feather on the ground right between my feet. It was perfectly white. No dirt. Not stepped on or anything in a mosh pit. I stared at the feather until I could get my breathing under control and get out of there, and I still have that feather. Edit. Thank you for the award, kind stranger. For anyone asking, the festival was southbound in Western Australia. Sadly it's no longer running. Once while walking to work as a teenager I asked God to show me a sign if I should get out of my relationship abusive ex, and just as I finished the prayer a fish came flying out of nowhere and smacked me in the face. I went down and blacked out for a second, and when I came to there were these 3 hillbilly men surrounding me, fanning me, and just generally freaking out. When they realized I was awake, they just started apologizing and said they swore they had put the strap on their cooler. They gave me some ice for my eye and walked me down to work so I could call my mom to pick me up. I broke up with my ex the next day out of fear of being smacked by a rogue fish again. After reading this thread, a group hug is needed. I was looking up at the night sky and said, "Dad, show me a shooting star," and one shot across the sky. He had passed a few years earlier, and it was purely coincidental, but I really needed it at the time. All my life, whenever I went to the beach, I had wanted to find an intact sand dollar. I had found lots of pieces, but never a whole one. When I was in my mid-30s, I went with a group of friends to the coast. I was walking alone along the beach and the moonlight close to midnight. I was feeling very sorry for myself in the dark and really lonely, even though I was with my friends that weekend. I had just started thinking the thought, wouldn't it be a great sign right now to know that I'm loved if I finally found a sand dollar? I had barely formed the thought when I looked down, and right at my feet was an intact sand dollar. Universe told your insecurities, I'm gonna pay you $1 sand dollar to duck off. The universe was pulling a Ricky. I was in the depths of despair. I had lost my great job, had to travel 2 hours every day with heavy tools each way to a temporary job I was doing. Sitting on the bus, thinking my world was over, and it all kind of got to me all at once, and I began to tear up. Not wanting to bawl my eyes out in public, I held it in. So I asked for something, anything that could show me that life wasn't worthless. A lady I didn't see must have how bad I was, or maybe it was just coincidence, but just after I cried out in my head, I heard the words, "Everything is going to be okay." It saved my life. Edit: I had no idea that this would affect you all so much. Sometimes it might be dark and a small spark starts a fire. Sometimes you're the small spark. Be the change you want to see in the world. Thank you for the awards too. I can now give awards to others. Similar story: stuck in a horrific job, eating myself to death at McDonald's. I was having a particularly shitty day and my boss had screamed at me and the other technicians over something that the boss had ducked up. I must have been looking extra miserable because this little old lady comes in. She notices me sitting at a table alone and smiles. She simply says, "Hey, don't let him win." It cut to my core. How could she know my fight? It's like she saw right through my defenses and nailed my ducking situation. A little while later she was leaving with her food and she smiled again and said, "Have a nice day." And I smiled back and told her, "Thank you. You too." So that's been my mantra ever since, don't let him win. It's simple, but it got me out of that shitty situation. Somehow kind little old ladies just always know, and then know exactly what to say too. Edit: I'm so glad I made this comment. So many people sharing amazing stories. This wasn't really asking for a sign, but I was going through a lot, and in a really shitty and dark place. Like the kind of place I honestly wasn't sure I'd survive. I was teetering on the edge of despair and genuinely going down the path towards doing something insanely drastic. I basically just asked the universe for help one day while in the middle of another crying episode, and I had this strange, sunny feeling kind of leak into the darkness I was harboring inside of me. The next day, by chance, I met my group of friends on a video game I played regularly at the time. They lived in an entirely different city and had entirely different lives from me, but we all just clicked. It took a month or two for me to settle into that friendship and understand that they were gonna stick around. And they've been my best friends for 3 years now. Some of my best memories are from that first summer that I knew them. I genuinely don't think I would have survived that time in my life had I not met them. I was feeling incredibly alone, and I was trying to come to terms with a lot of things all at once. I'm infinitely grateful for them. And I can't help but think that the universe was listening that day when, as a last-ditch effort, I asked it for help. People often underestimate the usefulness of video games beyond mere entertainment. I moved away from my hometown, and my best friend still lives there. One of our greatest ways of bonding is playing video games together. I really don't like my job, and I've been daydreaming about what I could do. I just needed a place to be able to do it. The next day I get offered to house sit for a couple years in this big Japanese house that has a storefront in the front. There's a perfect space to do what I would want to do. I would live rent free and be able to save up to buy my own business visa here. I wouldn't need to work in this job anymore. My son passed away, and I sat at the kitchen table in shock. I couldn't really believe he was gone. I asked him to send me a sign so I'd know he was still with us, in spirit if not in body. A few minutes later all the lights in the house went out. I didn't believe it was him, so I even checked the fuse box. I almost called an electrician, but for some reason I couldn't bring myself to do it. It was just the lights. The power points still worked, so I could cook, and the fridge was on. It stayed that way for 2 days, until I eventually said, okay, I know it's you, and they came back on. I was so overwhelmed with grief at the time. This seemed like nothing, but now I see how crazy it was. I get this might be hard for some people to believe, but I really don't care if anyone believes it or not. I just needed to know he was somewhere else besides in the ground, because he was only in his 20s and it just wasn't fair he was gone so young. You should never outlive your children. My sister lost her husband at the age of 32 to cancer. I slept at her house the night he passed away. I slept with my 2-year-old niece and my sister slept with her 4-year-old son. Shortly after my niece fell asleep, she started swatting at her face and giggling in her sleep saying no more kisses daddy. Talking to my sister the next morning, she told me that shortly after her son fell asleep, he randomly stood up in his bed and cried out I love you too daddy, then went back to sleep. Just typing this now, my phone randomly auto-corrected when I was typing the word niece into Bruce, my deceased brother-in-law's name. I always feel like he's watching over us. I got home from my best friend's funeral. The whole time sitting in the funeral home asking him or God for a sign. When I got home I turned on Thet V, and his favorite song was playing on Much Music. I'm currently worried about my best friend. Honestly, being my only friend that could just kick open the door, say what's up duckers type stuff. It's annoying to see him going down this path of drinking because of some personal stuff in his life. But I hope you're doing well, also not a friggin' idiot. I was 18 years old, recently graduated from high school and basically being forced to attend cosmetology school by my stepmom, while also working a full-time job. I was exhausted all the time. My stepmom and I were very religious for a long time, but I was starting to question my faith and stop making church a priority. This caused a lot of drama and I think resentment from her and my father, who worked out of the country. While attending cosmetology school I had made friends and was so starved for any sort of friendship and I guess even affection. I would tell them the things I hated about my home life. They helped me start to see how toxic my parents and situation was. I knew I had to move out. I tried to do so amicably, but to no avail. In fact, my attempts to leave peacefully backfired and caused more problems. At the time, being religious, I prayed for a way out, but my prayers rarely were answered, so I grew hopeless. A few weeks later, after a rough few days between me and my stepmom, things came to a head one night and she called my father. They had threatened 4 years to kick me out. I was a seriously well-behaved kid, so I was always the one to apologize for whatever they thought I did that was so horrible. This particular night, when the threat entered the air, I saw it as a sign and a fleeting opportunity. I packed my things and was gone the next day. It's been 4 years and I'm now living in a different state with my husband and daughter, and our second child is due to be born in about a month. My wife and I had been considering getting a second cat for some time without reaching any conclusion. Then, as I was walking back to the apartment one evening, a young feline popped up out of the drainage beside the sidewalk. Basically, he just looked at me and said, "Let's cut to the chase. I'll be moving in with you now. You need a cat." I'm a very cute, completely adorable kitten. The only problem I see here is that you might not be smart enough to recognize this opportunity. Be your best self right now, dude. So I looked at him and said, "I can't make this decision solo. Let me go get the wife." He just looked at me and nodded his head like, "Go on. I'll wait." Considering that she just decided that today was cat birthday, he may be regretting the decision. But I'm completely okay with the way things have gone over the past years. I decided to kill myself about the age of 13. Life sucked, and I planned to go home from church that night and off myself if there was no direct intervention. Out of nowhere my aunt stopped me and said, "I feel like you need to come home with me." And I'm still here. Damn bitch. I had gotten a job at a retail store and went in for the orientation and to do training. The vibe was kind of off at the store, but I ignored it. I got to the back where the computers were, but couldn't shake the feeling of being uncomfortable. In my head I said, "Alright universe, if I'm not meant to work here, show me some kind of sign. Make them send me home for the day or something." About an hour later, a huge storm rolled in and shut off the power in the store. The manager came in and said for me to go home since their computers weren't working and I couldn't do my training. A couple months later, and I was working at a new job that I absolutely love. Lottery tickets. I was always curious about lottery tickets, but never wanted to indulge in it. One day in a grocery store, I told the universe, "I'm going to buy a lotto ticket now, not the grand bumper ones. Just a simple scratch one for the first time in life. If I win a prize, I'll take it as a sign from you and never buy it again." I bought a ticket for 3, scratched it and won 500. I smiled and donated 250 of the amount. Enjoyed some good food multiple times with the other 250. Never bought or looked at a lottery ticket again. Will never do. My then girlfriend was having a really awful week. I felt terrible for her, which made me realize how serious our relationship was, because empathy is not a strong suit of mine. She wanted to take a trip to the Grand Tetons to clear her head. She wanted to see a moose on this trip, but it was August, so relatively unlikely since they tend to move to higher elevations that time of year. I had never seen a moose in the wild. Before we left, I thought, if we see a moose on this whirlwind 72-hour road trip, I will take it as a sign I should marry this girl. Sure enough, right in the middle of the day, on one of the busiest trails in the park, is a great big bull moose hanging out in the lake. Married 5 years this year.